This is Lieutenant General Nadja West. Hey, thanks for tuning into the Long Gray Lesson Show. It's a podcast that motivates and inspires leaders to pursue their passions and to leave a positive impact in their communities. Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is your host, Tom Lay, and I want to welcome you guys back again to another episode of the Long Gray Lesson Show. I'm honored and I'm privileged to having this very special guest with me today. Class of 1982, Company C1, Go Celts.
That's right.
Family medicine and dermatology physician. She is currently the 44th Surgeon General of the United States Army and Commanding General of the United States Army Medical Command. I would like to welcome Lieutenant General Nadja West.
Well, thanks. It's so great being here. Appreciate the invitation.
It's such a pleasure and opportunity to have you here today, ma'am. Thank you so much for just taking time to be here on the show.
No, absolutely. I really enjoy being able to continue to connect because I think it's important if we want to have the next generation of leaders, following in our footsteps. It keeps things fresh, keeps me fresh as well because it's 82. It's a long time ago, and so it kind of keeps me abreast of what's going on with your subsequent generations as well. So it's quite an honor to do it.
So just to begin and just to go back, for those who don't already know your story, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Wow. So I know we only have 30 minutes, yes, but so bottom line, come from a family of 12, all of us adopted by some really awesome parents. My dad was in the Army. He retired after 33 years. He was a warrant officer in the logistics branch. He was quartermaster. My mom, activist in her own right, did a lot to help others. And in fact, my brothers and sisters and I and about 300 other kids that she and some nuns in orphanages helped find families for wouldn't be here today. So that's my background. Grew up in a great family. That service was stressed early on.
Mm-hmm.
Of my 11 brothers and sisters, 10 of us served, and so in some aspect or another. My sisters were WACs, and most folks, that's historical, for a lot of the young people today, Women's Army Corps, when the women were in separate branches than the male soldiers. My sister, that was a WAF, same with the Air Force, and my next youngest to me was a Navy, which I had a lot of fun with this past weekend after the Army-Navy game,
Absolutely.
Master Chief Petty Officer. So she was joining the Navy just as women were incorporated into the regular Navy. So a lot of great examples for me growing up.
So a lot of service is ingrained in the family dynamic. Is that what really influenced you to attend the United States Military Academy?
It is. It's that service and the fact that my brother graduated in 76. And so he was in C3, class of 76, and women were just being introduced into the service academies then. So they started the summer of 76. And so I was going to go ROTC. I knew I wanted to serve. And he's the one who suggested, hey, they're opening up the academies to women. You might want to consider applying. And so that's another, a main reason why I went to West Point. But service would have been in some aspect if it hadn't been there.
Absolutely. And you were the class of 1982, correct, ma'am?
Right.
So you were the third female class, the cohort, to attend West Point.
Right.
What was that dynamic and that time period like for you going through as the third class?
Well, it was, it was quite interesting. The last all-male class were the class of 79, and there were some members, again, not all and not most, but, it only takes a few to set the climate. And there were some that, felt that their duty was to run all the women out before they graduated. And so there was a little bit of that you had to deal with. But for the most part, there were professionals all throughout. And I was just very grateful for the women in class of 80 and 81 who paved the way. I just can't imagine what the first class went through when they had no one in the upper classes to at least to mentor them for. But so it was, and as you know, as a grad, there's camaraderie with your class. And so they always tell you you're the best asset, the number one asset that you have is your classmate. And as 35-year reunion I went to, that's still the case. And so going through it with your cohort, your classmates, male, female, made it shared experience, shared misery. It made it not as bad.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I know when we're at West Point, we're often faced with a lot of challenges, difficulty and obstacles. And just during that time frame, like just reiterating that, you're that third class of females, but also as an African American woman. And so, did you face any other kind of obstacles that maybe the typical cadet during that time frame did not experience? And how did you overcome some of those obstacles?
I would say, like overt, racism and things like that. Not so much. I mean, there are pockets. There are people that come from all over the world, or all over the world, but all over the country. So there are people that had strange ideas. I think the number one obstacle was hair, because when we were going through, you had to cut your hair. You couldn't wear it back in a bun. So the first couple classes, you had to cut it, and and my hair is naturally curly, so I used to have long hair and wear it back, and you could pull it back. But going through the barber shop, the barbers just literally first day just chopped it. I'd cut it before I left, and I was like, whoa. And so just trying to deal with that, and folks would come to formation with rulers to see the depth of my hair, because curly hair grows out, doesn't grow down, and so just silly. I mean, it seems silly like that, but when you're 17 years old, which was my age when I went in, that was quite an experience. The smirks when we used to have to take our hats off, and of course, your hair had the shape of the inside of the hat, and you could hear the people behind, snickering and laughing and things. And so that, that's minor. Mm-hmm. Now it's like, who cares? But when you're, again, 17, they're just, young, adolescents still, your physical appearance matters. And when you feel like you can't look your best just because of the, the environment that you're in. Not that that's important, but you want to have a neat appearance. But when you're always, have to worry about that, I would say that was one obstacle where, the snickers and, pointing from the classmates and things, and upper class sometimes was, I think the main thing when you said about being an African American female, that others that don't have that. And now it's different because you can wear it back, you can do different things to keep your hair in, but, that was the main. That was one of the things that I think was just a different obstacle that a lot of people couldn't relate to.
Absolutely. I mean, I know when I showed up as well, there were times I felt like giving up. Sometimes it was not just the academics. Sometimes it was not just the physical component, but it was just everything all at once. Where does your strength and your resiliency, where does that originate from? What kept you going while you're there?
Well, a couple things. One is I would almost say first my faith, because if I didn't have faith, I mean, I'm Roman Catholic by faith tradition, and so my parents taught, always maintain your faith and realize that when you're struggling, there's hope, because there's more to this life than just what we're seeing, and our life is not about us; it's about what we can do, and so that kind of kept me going. That there were other things at play. And then proving those who told me I couldn't do it, to prove them wrong. And so that was really a strong one, I think, at making sure that those that said, hey, you won't be here when I graduate, it was one of the seniors said to me. I was even thinking of quitting. I said, well, I can't quit now, because if I wait till the day after he leaves, then I can quit, but not while he's here. He's not going to see me drop out. And so that was kind of a motivator, which... maybe for the wrong reasons, but it kept me going. And then there was one of just not wanting to disappoint my family, parents. People had so much faith in me, that were encouraging me, hey, you can do it. And so the encouragement helped, and it also served as something to know that, hey, there are people depending upon me to do well. And so if it's within my power, I'm going to do it. And so those are, I guess, three levels of motivation that kind of kept things going.
And after graduating West Point, the obstacles and the difficulty doesn't go away.
Right.
And so what made you to decide to make this a career, given all those?
Yeah, and it was never really a decision that I'm going to make this a career. I was taking one day at a time. I knew I wanted to serve in the military because my dad had such a great experience. Again, and part of the story is, he enlisted when it was a segregated army, 1939. And so for someone to experience what he had to go through during that time, to stay for 33 years, because he could see the great leveler that the Army was, because you had people from all walks of life, and then those who had preconceived ideas of what certain kinds of people are like actually learned that they were not like that, that we're all the same. And then the Army really led the way in the desegregation of society, because President Truman's order to desegregate the services, was well before anything happened in society. So he had a vision of seeing the Army, not a vision, he actually experienced it. Even though it was, I don't know how he did it, because when you're in it, how do you see that it's going to be better? But he somehow thought, hey, I'm going to stick with it because I can see that this is an institution, the Army, probably the military, but the Army specifically is what he had experience with. And so I knew I wanted to be part of that. How long? Didn't really know. But when I got into it, that was what I think motivated me, is working with other military members to see the commitment, the dedication, what we all do. We take it for granted. I took it for granted because I come from a military family. But when you talk to others outside of the military, they see what we have and say, gosh, it's really, just to see how you guys come together as a team. You could be from disparate parts, different cultures, different society, parts of society, different classes, all that. But you come together as soldiers, and they just see that we're a team. And that's something that we do very rapidly. I'm sure you've experienced it as well, right?
Absolutely.
People from all walks of life, and then there's your lifelong buddies. You stop seeing the differences, and you just start seeing, hey, we're fellow soldiers. And so that camaraderie and purpose, I think, really what kept me for all these 30 plus, almost 40 years.
I think that's where there's a lot of strength in this organization.
Absolutely.
That we harness the power of diversity.
Right.
And we come from all walks of life, but we all have so much to bring to the table.
Right.
And it's truly incredible to see how this organization functions with how large it is and just the different people that we have. So it is definitely reassuring.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I know you were on a previous podcast that you did with Julia Turner. She was the editor-in-chief of Slate magazine. Mm-hmm. And she talked about how the Army has evolved since you first joined. How has your leadership style evolved with that change?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. The Army has really changed. What opportunities are available for all members of the team. The organizations that we have right now, Army Futures Command, first time since the 70s, where we have now brand new 4-star command. So there are a lot of changes. But I think what stays the same in leadership styles, sometimes I think it's really difficult to say you change your leadership style, because your style is kind of who you are. And, it has to be, part of your personality, because if you try to take on someone else's persona to be a leader, it can be disingenuous. So I think, knowing that the style that you have, you can kind of hone it around the edges of how you reach other people. So you evolve to make sure you understand, or try to, because it's hard when it's multi-generational, to understand what motivates the next generation if you're used to what motivates, yourself. And having children helps, because I've got a 25-year-old and a 22-year-old. One's a senior at West Point, and what's important to them and how they relate, how they communicate is a lot different than with my generation. And so I think it's important for us to understand, and that's when I use the word empathy as leaders, to try to understand who you lead and what members of the team that you have, to how to best relate to them.
Absolutely. And this doesn't just encompass just the Army organization, but a lot of different organizations, if they want to stay ahead and be innovative, they have to be adaptive.
Absolutely.
And flexible, because our environment is always consistently changing.
It is, and I think especially in the one of the major things I've seen is back in the day, my dad's generation was you joined an organization and you stayed for 30 years or 20 years, whatever, got your gold watch, and then you retired. And so there was loyalty to an organization, to a brand, and then that's how you started with the company and you stayed with the company. Now there's a lot of transientness, and not for negative reasons. It's not a lack of loyalty. It's just more of a multiple interests. And our younger generation now doesn't necessarily need the stability. They just like the challenges of working in different places. And so I think that's a different mindset. Again, not 100%, not all, but statistics show that most people will have worked in 5 or 6 different companies, during their career, if not more. Whereas older generations, you're with one, you stay with it unless they go out of business or you have to move to something else. And so I think understanding that curiosity, what causes that, and to try to make sure that we can have those same abilities, especially in the military, where we're still like, the way it's, career driven. How do you attract individuals to stay long term, that have that sense of, hey, I want to see different ideas, and try to challenging them internally, I think, is a way that we need to work on how to do that.
On December 9th, 2015, you were confirmed by the U.S. Senate to be appointed the Surgeon General of the United States Army.
Yeah.
How did you feel when you first heard news about this opportunity?
Well, it was very humbling and very overwhelming, not in a negative way. It was just, first, it was really hard to believe because, me being selected as Surgeon General means I've reached the top position in the Army Medical Department. And, knowing my colleagues, I would say, why me? Why not, so-and-so? All these other great folks that I grew up with in my, 30 years in the military, you get to know, you work side by side with folks. And I saw others that could have been just as good at doing that. Why was it me and not them? And so that was the first thought. I was very, very grateful, very thankful. And, of course, given my faith, it's like, well, this was, almost, a divine intervention to, have someone like, someone like me with my background to get that. And so then a lot of people ask, what do you mean someone like you? Why not you? So you're asking why you, why not you? And it's just, again, it's very humbling because I know that there are others that could have been in this position doing very well as well. And it was quite an honor to be selected out of such a group of high quality folks.
Did Cadet Lieutenant West foresee this opportunity many years ago?
Absolutely not. As a cadet, literally, I was just glad to, my goal was to make it through and graduate, because I was not one of these, hey, I wasn't a star woman. I wasn't one of the, great folks that was, on all these different committees and teams, and just, so I really would not have been a standout. If you'd ask anyone, I think back then, who would you pick the most likely person to do that? It probably would not have been me, in my opinion. Because again, knowing your classmates, knowing other folks, there were a lot of folks that were high speed, low drag back then. And so I always thought I wanted to do the best that I could, and do every job that I was given to the best of my abilities. That's what my parents taught me. The old bloom where you're planted, and take advantage of every situation you're in to do the best that you can in it. And so, but I never would have thought, if anyone had told me that, I would have, I would have found it quite humorous. In fact, my classmate, so there was a classmate of mine in C1, Kevin Mangum, Lieutenant General. He's now retired. Kevin Mangum was the deputy commander of TRADOC when he retired. We were sitting down talking once, fellow Sergeant Charlie 1, and we were both laughing, saying, hey, we never would have thought. And he was like, well, I always knew you. I'm like, no, you didn't. I always thought you. And he goes, no, you didn't. So it's one where I think we all think ourselves, we try to do our best, and we just leave the rest up to those who know what is needed for our Army, for whatever we need to do, and hopefully they're making the right choice. I always have to laugh, though, because I think, do they have any idea what they've just done? But yeah, so it's never would have thought that, but very grateful for the opportunity.
That is awesome, ma'am.
Yeah.
So as a military professional, as a general, as a medical professional, as a physician, and also as a mother and a spouse, how do you manage to juggle all of this time and balance everything?
There's a perception that you can do it all. And that, I think that causes a lot of stress, because then people are under the impression, I should be able to do this. I should be able to work. I should be able to have hobbies. I should be able to have a family. I should be able to do X, Y, Z, volunteer for the church, volunteer for this. And why can't I do it all? Because I see other people doing it. And I think if we sell this, you can do it all, then I think it introduces more stress than necessary. So you have to realize that you have to prioritize. There are some things that you cannot do. And I think, and you have to be okay with that. For family, and work. There were times when my husband and I had to decide, okay, we're not going to take, this job, or we may be separated for stretches of time. We were for a 6-year period of time. We were kind of playing leapfrog with assignments, and so you realize that you just have to realize you cannot do it all simultaneously, because then you'll, I think, cause unnecessary stress and affect your health. But have a, I think, eyes open that this is a possibility that you will not be able to do, all the same things at once.
Absolutely.
And it's okay, and you have to be okay with that.
I think that's the most important. That last point was you have to be okay with that.
Right.
You have to be transparent with that, because us as leaders, there's so many people that look up to us and emulate what we do, and us wanting to be a good example and just steward to showcase that we don't have to burn ourselves out
Right.
in order to accomplish all these different tasks.
Right.
And I think that will really help our soldiers as well understand that work-life balance,
Right.
and allow them to be able to accomplish the mission in a healthy way.
Right. Yeah. Because given the high performers, they'll say, well, I should be, and then they'll say, well, gosh, I should be able to do all this, and I think we have to realize, nope, something's going to have to give.
Absolutely, ma'am.
Yeah.
So you have many firsts. You're the first African American woman to be promoted to Major General and Lieutenant General. You're the first African American man or woman to be appointed Surgeon General of the U.S. Army. You're the highest ranking female graduate of West Point. You are considered a trailblazer by many. I would wholeheartedly agree. What does this position mean to you, and what sort of responsibility does it entail?
Yeah, and that's always hard to hear when people say, you're the first this, because I don't see myself as that. I just see myself as, just like I mentioned before, doing the best job I can in each area that I have. But I appreciate it. So I find it first odd, because for me to be the first of anything just sounds like something historic, and I don't see myself as an historic person. I just see myself as doing what I need to do to get done, just like everybody else. But I do appreciate those who came before me to make that possible. I think of my sisters who were in the Women's Army Corps at WACS, and others. And so if you look at Total Army, there was actually another 2-star prior to me, African American female, that was in the reserve component. That was Major General Anderson. And so technically, if you look at Total Army, but for the active, yes, for that, and the 3-star, yes. But so I appreciate what those have done before me to get to the point where I could do that. I look at Pat Walker, who now is Pat Locke, who was class of '80, African American female, and Joy Dallas. So those are the first 2 women, African American women, who graduated from West Point. So if it weren't for them, going through what they went through the first couple of years, they made it easier for me, 2 years later. And so I appreciate what they did to make me to make it possible for me to see success in someone when they both graduated in 1980. I said that, so I can make it too. And so I think my position is that I'm grateful for those who came before me, and I do understand that there's a obligation that I have to. And others say, well, it's not really. I think it is an obligation I have to ensure that others can be encouraged, and I especially think, because if I can make it, then anybody can. There's nothing special about me, and I want to make sure that others can see that. Look at my background. And so I didn't come from a family, I came from a phenomenal family, my parents, but, an orphan, not a typical story that, people that were in a position of that to think that they could succeed. Coming from a very humble background, my parents were not, rich by any stretch of the imaginations. My dad grew up, again, segregated Army. My mom grew up her dad was a bellhop at a hotel in Arkansas, which, bellhops, those are the folks, they don't have that much, but people take your luggage up to the room, and his whole wages to support his family of 7 kids, his wife and 7 kids, was what he made in tips. And if he didn't get any tips, then he didn't have any money that day. And so I come from a family that's not necessarily one that people think that you need to have to be successful. So there are a lot of people who have backgrounds, and they may hear the story and think, well, I can do that as well. So I feel an obligation to not only tell my story, but to perform well. I don't ever want to be a source of embarrassment for multiple things, for the military academy, for the Army, for women, for African Americans. So there's a lot of things that I feel an obligation, and it's a light burden. I just need to do the right things that my parents taught me from an early age. So I don't have to do anything extra, but work as hard as I can to show others that it's possible with hard work.
Thank you so much for sharing that, ma'am.
Sure.
You're an absolute inspiration to me.
Well, I appreciate
just
that.
Seeing everything that you've done, all the accomplishments that you have come across, it's very encouraging for me myself to be able to have that even as a dream, and I can make that reality. So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
I believe many people would agree that you're very accomplished, very distinguished, and had a distinguished career path. What is your personal definition of success, and do you feel you have achieved it?
Wow. So I want to live a life that is worthy of the phenomenal opportunities that I've had. I want to make sure that every job I've done, I've made a difference in ensuring that those who I was responsible for receive the best as a physician, the best care, as a leader, the best leadership, whatever in my area along the way, that I was able to make a difference and do the best that I could. And then to make sure that those that come behind me, there are people that I've left that can fill in, like you, that can fill in our Army Medical Department in a manner which I know you'll do a phenomenal job. And so that's my definition of success, that I've been able to influence the generation to come behind us to make sure we continue to provide phenomenal healthcare services to those that depend upon us.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, ma'am. I want to thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely.
I know you have a very busy schedule, and just making the time to be on this podcast, it means so much.
No, absolutely.
And as well as your commitment and dedication to this country and the American people.
All right. And I got to say, this soon after the Army-Navy game, that was a glorious win. And I also want to make sure we got a bowl game coming up,
Yes,
so
ma'am.
we're rooting for the Army team. I know we're going to do great things, and so all I have to say is, beat Navy. I'm sorry for those that are our Navy colleagues, but beat Navy again and again and again. So
Excellent.
that's it. Okay.